Alright guys, welcome back to our session on VBA UserForm. Previously we have discussed about ActiveX form control. Now we'll shift our focus that is something virtually identical to ActiveX controls, which is the UserForm or UserForm controls. The reason that they are almost equivalent to one another is because whatever controls that you could find in ActiveX could be found in UserForms, give or take 95% of them. Okay, so if you are familiar with the controls in ActiveX and on the Excel form controls, then this is not going to be something entirely new to you. But the reason why we want to invoke these controls in the VBA UserForm is, number one, is because it allows us to leverage on the power of the UserForm events. Okay, so we saw in the previous example using the ActiveX control, when I wanted to populate dynamic range into the combo box, I had to use the worksheet activate event. So this basically means the user would have to get out of the worksheet and return back to the worksheet to have the values reflected dynamically into the combo box. However, with the user form, we are able to accomplish something very similar using the user form event, which is basically, specifically, the user form initialization event. Okay, so this initialization event is a very powerful event because this event basically runs in the background, and then when the user form is loaded, you are able to see the results of what has happened during the initialization event. This is why we use the user form initialization event to populate entries into our user form controls, such as the combo box, list box, etc. Okay, so this is something that is not achievable in the ActiveX control. Okay, historically, user form have been used to ensure validation of data, to ensure that data is inputted in a certain way, right? Numbers, string, etc. However, I must let you know that VBA user form's functionality extends far beyond inputting data. Okay, so any user form objects under the user form can be accessed by the keyword me, right? So what I mean by that is that I can go to my Visual Basic application, I can insert my user form, and it would exist as a separate entity, like this sheet 1, sheet 2, and this workbook. The user form would exist as a separate entity in the VBA editor, and we could call upon all the controls within the user form using the keyword me. Okay, IntelliSense will be able to identify all the list of available controls in the user form. Okay, so the science behind the user form is, as I have told you, right? Before the user form is even loaded or activated, right? So activated meaning the user form appears on the user's eyes. It runs through the initialization event, right? So when it goes through the initialization event, it is something that we as users don't see, but this event runs, and as I've told you, this is the stage whereby we would, by the virtue of it being invincible to the average users and only visible to the computer, we would populate our user form controls with entries and range, whatever it is, right? So that's, as I've told you, the advantage of the user form is you could leverage on the events within the user form. So then the user form is activated and it appears on the window, right, on the Excel workbook. And the users can access and do whatever that the user form has intended it to be. And then finally, we exit the user form. The way we exit the user form is to use the keyword unload. And we'll go through the ins and outs of user form here. Okay. However, I've divided this user form session of our playlist into 3 separate videos. Basically, the first video will be going through the fundamentals of user form. Okay, we'll be setting up our very own user form and get to know basically pretty much everything that is required. Okay, and then in the next session we'll be going through or the next video we'll be going through the combo box, basically on setting up dependent combo box, okay, and the specifics of it. And finally, on the third session, okay, we will be going through list box mapping. Okay, so let's not worry about that now. Let's worry about the question that's ahead of us. Okay, so this is a question that I've gone through many times with my students, right? So it's a relatively straightforward question, but you need to have understanding on how the user form works. Okay, we are assigned with the task of building an entry user form for all new joining members of the University Gene Club. The user form should contain the following detail: full name. Okay, so this is a frame of how the user form should look. The full name should be basically only text and no numerics, no numbers whatsoever. So if it's the user's entering number, we should get an alert. The user should get an alert that only numbers, only text and no numbers. The amount paid, that should only be numbers, no text. Then the premium, basically there's a premium percentage, okay, from 10% to 30%, and has an increment of 10% using that, and has an increment of 10%, which can be invoked by using the spin button. So the spin button has an up arrow and down arrow, so you can spin up and spin down, and the increment should be by 10%. Minimum value is 10%, maximum value is 30%, increment is by 10%. Okay, so the possible options are basically 10%, 20%, or 30%. Okay, then they have the country of origin that is outlined in a list box format. So you have Sweden, Germany, Austria. Okay, so we are not doing any list box mapping here, right? So it's a basic list box with just 3 values in it, right? Okay, and whatever the user has selected it should be returned into the user form, into the sheet, okay, of this table. I'll explain to you in a while, right? So, and then you have the gender. So you have 2 possible genders, male and female. Okay, the form should contain an add button to populate the results into the table in sheet 2, right? So once I've inputted all the relevant required value, I should transfer this into the user form, into the table on this sheet 2, okay? So the form should contain a cancel button to exit the user form. So I should be able to exit the user form anytime I wish, or the user or the clerk, whoever it is in charge of the user form. Okay, they hit cancel and the user form exits, right? The form should contain a reset button to reset all the values input in the user form. So if somewhere down the line I have inputted values and I decided I want to reset all the field, then I can just hit reset and the value should return to, and the text box should be fresh. Basically, all the values, all the fields should be blank. Okay, and then we're going to do some mathematical operations. Amount paid should be multiplied by 2, right? As the university is providing an extra month of membership for all joining members. So if I have $50 in the field here for the amount paid, this, when it's returned to the worksheet, it should return me $100, right? Multiplied by 2. So we're going to do some mathematics, right? Because the university is providing an extra month membership. Amount paid should be returned in currency format. Okay, so on the currency, I encourage you to check your regional settings on the window to make sure that you have the currency as desired. Okay, so I have set the regional settings as the US currency, the US basically region. So US currency in essence, because it's going to be easier for everyone to follow along. So if you're not seeing the currency that is desired, then there's something to do with the regional setting in your window. And you can just YouTube that up and Google that up to see how to do the fixing for that. Okay, and then finally, so the amount paid, currency format. Premium rate should be written as percentage on the worksheet with 2 decimal places. So if I have 10% in the user form, it should return me 10.00%. Okay, so this is a relatively straightforward question. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to insert a user form, and then I should be able to see view the user form, and then I should be able to see the toolbox. If you're not seeing the toolbox, go to view and have the toolbox checked. Okay, make sure the toolbox is checked. Okay, then the next thing is I'm going to insert a module. Why I'm going to need a module, I'll explain that to you in a while. So don't worry, just insert a module first. Okay, just insert a module first. So you have a user form and then you have a module. Okay, so I'm going to set up the first 2 sections of the user form, right? I'm not going to set up the whole thing, okay, because it's going to take it's going to take forever. So I'm just going to show you the first 2 and how I basically do the alignment, and then I'm going to fast forward the video, and I'll come back to you once we're done setting up the form. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to change the name of the user form. This is the code name, so I'm just going to call it entry. Okay, this is an entry form. Okay, and then the caption is what you see here. Okay, I'm just going to name it as entry form. Okay, that's all. Okay, and then I'm going to set up the form as how it was displayed in the frame. Okay, right, I'll be sharing this workbook with you, so no worries. Okay, you don't have to follow whatever that I'm writing here. And then I'm going to just Well, because I've done this question so many times, so I basically remember what are the fields required. Okay, so on the first one, we're going to have the full name. Okay, so we're going to change the name on the caption or on the name, right? The name is always the code name, so we're changing the caption, full name. And then I'm going to show you a trick as to how to get your alignments right quickly, right? Without having to drag and try to, to inspect visually, okay? You don't have to do this visual kind of inspection to see if they are aligned correctly, right? There's a mathematical way to do it. So I'm going to demonstrate that to you, and then I'll fast forward the video basically, and then I'll get to you once we set up the whole form, right? To proceed with the codes. So the second one, I believe, is amount paid, right? Yeah. So I'm sure because I've done this so many times, as I told you, right? So I'm then just going to control and then just drag down. And then the third one. So I'm just going to show you the first three, how to set up the alignment, and then the rest we'll fast forward. Yeah. Okay. So premium percentage. Okay. So we're changing it on the caption. Okay. The caption is what you see here. The caption. Okay. You don't have to worry about the name here. Okay. This is a code name. Okay. So the way. Okay. I'm going to insert a text box. Right. I'm just going to insert one text box. Okay, I'm not going to worry about whether they're aligned or not. I'm just going to insert randomly. In fact, I'm going to make it look so ugly, and then I'm going to show you how it's done, right? How we can do it how we can get all the alignments right relatively quickly. So the trick is, number one, I want to get all these text box standardized in size. So I'm going to change this width here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the width as 160, this one, and then this one is going to be 160. Well, this age is so invasive. Okay, 160. And then, well, that was a joke, right? So, with 160. Okay, so we have the size standardized, but they're not aligned, right? So first I want to align this. I want to align it on the left. So to align it on the left, I will go to the left, and I'm going to set some standardized value. 17 for this. And then I'm going to standardize this as 17 as well. And I'm going to standardize this, basically left meaning how many pixels from the left. Then I'm going to standardize the top, right? The top meaning how many pixels from the top, right? So I'm going to say 30. And this one will also be 30 because it's going to be 30 pixels from the top. And then this one, the alignment has been set at left. So the top now will be, instead of 48, it's going to be 60, right? We want to have even space, right? We want to have even space. And this one is going to be 60 as well. Okay. And then this one, the top is going to be 90 pixels because we're having space, equal space in between, right? Between these two. So 90. And this one, the top will be 90. Okay. Now we want to align these three text box. The way I'm going to do it, I'm going to set a standardized value as well on the left. So that left here was 17, right? The left here was 17. We standardized it to 17. So this one, we're going to standardize how many pixels from the left. Maybe we can have 85 pixels from the left. Then I'm going to have these 85 pixels from the left. And then 85 pixels from the left. Okay. So you could see everything has been standardized and it looks really, really great now. Okay, so now before I fast forward the video, I'd like to touch on a couple of details. Okay, number one is this one here is going to be a list box. So it's not going to be a text box. Then I'm going to introduce a spin button. And then I'm also going to have a frame around the option button. All right, although we only have one group of option buttons here and we don't need a frame. But in the future, if you have multiple option groups, you want to use the frame. Okay, so that's why I'm going to introduce a frame to show you just basically how it's done in the future. Then we're going to have three buttons, basically add, cancel, and reset to perform whatever the operations that I've mentioned earlier. Okay, so now I'm going to fast forward the video and I'll see you in a while.
done with the setting up of the form. Okay, so now, before I even proceed to the code, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I can call this form from the workbook. Okay, so the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to just write a simple procedure in a module. Okay, and then I'm going to call the form entry.show. So this is going to basically activate the form on the Excel window when the macro is run. Okay, so sub FRM, and then I'm going to go to sheet 2. I'm just going to insert a shape. Okay, and then I'm just going to rename it run form, and then I'm going to right click, assign the macro, which is the form, right? This macro basically activates the form, right? Because we're using the form.show, right? So remember that keyword show, when you have that, it basically activates the macro. Okay, basically activates the form. So if I hit this form, now I see the form. Okay, and you can see the alignment looks absolutely amazing, right? So you can just cancel. So that's why make sure to use the top and left. Not many people are aware of it, okay, but now you are. Okay, so pass on this knowledge to your friends in the future in case you see them struggling with the alignment. Okay, so now the first thing I want to do is go to my user form. Okay, the user form entry, and I'm gonna go into the initialization. I've mentioned a lot about the initialization, right? So this is you have the list of events associated with the user form, and what I'm interested is in with the initialization. Okay, because the initialization is the event that basically does not appear visible to the average user's eyes, but it is an event that is running in the background. And why do we use this event is because we are going to populate items. So remember, I'm going to populate items into the list box, right? We have the 3 countries. The 3 countries. Okay. So what was the list box name? It was named list box 1, right? And the spin button was just named spin button. Okay. So once we have established the codes for the initialization, what I want to do is I want to go back into the user form, and then I want to make sure that I have names for the text box that I recognize in my code, right? So because if I go to the code now, I'm not sure what the buttons are. Command button, what does this command button want? What's command button 3, right? Well, okay, I know the option button 1 is for male and female, but that's about it, right? I don't know what is this text box and all of that, right? So we have to assign a name that we understand. And make sure and the name I'm talking about is a code name. And when you assign the code name, make sure it does not have a name that is clashing with the VBA object library. Okay, so that's important as well. Okay, so make sure your name is not something like name, because that name is existing in the VBA object library. You want a unique name that you're sure does not exist in the VBA object library. Okay, so I'm just going to add item into the list box. So I know that I'm adding it into the list box because I only have 1 list box. Okay, so we'll just leave it as its name, as its default code name. Okay, and then just going to add the 3 countries. I'm using add item. Austria. Yeah, I remember this was the 3 countries. Okay. Next thing. Okay, we'll not talk about the spin button here yet. Okay, never mind. Okay, but we also have to assign values for the spin button, right? So remember, never mind, we'll just do it here before I proceed to change the name of the controls in our form, right? So I'm going to say me dot spin button 1 dot value. Okay, so I'm actually what I'm going to do is I know that I'm going to assign the value 110 initially, right? Okay, and then I'm going to have the max value max as 30. Remember, the increment maximum was 30%. That was the ceiling, right? And the min was 10, right? So when it's loaded onto the user form, the value should return as 10. Okay, the value should return as 10. But this value, this is a spin button. Okay, which one is a spin button? This one is a spin button. This value should be going into the premium text box. Okay, this value should be going into the premium text box. Okay, so that's why I am just going to leave it as it is now. I'm just going to comment it out, right? I'm just going to comment it out, but we've already written this section of the code. And then I'm just going to close, and then I'm going to run the form. Okay, I can see this thing, right? So this premium, we are not seeing the 10% yet, because as I told you, we have only this value that we have assigned, the 10 to 10, basically the default value of 10, the maximum of 30, and the lower limit of 10. We're going to have to assign the value that we have assigned into the premium. And I'll be showing that to you in a while, right? So but before we go there, I'm going to name this, okay? So we're going to change the code name, right? Now it's text box 1. I don't know what text box 1 is. So I'm just going to name it my name. I'm not going to name it something like name, N-A-M-E. It's too generic. It might be clashing with the VBA object library. Okay, paid, I'm just going to name it as paid, right? So name, my name, paid, premium. Okay, I'm just going to go lowercase everything, okay? Premium. Country, we already have this list box 1, right? You know there's only one list box. So this is not a text box, it's a list box. So mail, option button 1, option button 2, right? That's the name, the code name. This one, command button 1, I definitely have to change the code name to something that I know. So I'm just going to name it add. Cancel for the second one. And the third one is reset. Okay. So now we have named everything the way that we are able to recognize them. Okay. My name, paid, premium, and basically we have all the names. So we're going to go and write the code. So we have completed the initialization event. Okay. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to uncomment it later. Okay. We're just not letting the code run, because now what I want to do, okay, is before I proceed with the specifics of the line in the code, let's solve the cancel and reset. Okay. Before we go to the add, right, where we're going to deal with all of these controls in the user form, right? So if I'm going to go to the code, right? So let's first go to cancel. So what happens when we cancel? We just unload the form, right? So what are we unloading? Just we can use me meaning the user form, right? Me meaning the user form, to exit the form from the windows. Okay, so we have solved the first part. The second part, the reset button. Okay, this one we are also going to unload me, exit the sub, right? But now once we have unloaded the sub, right, we want to reintroduce. Once we have unloaded the form, we want to reintroduce it back, right? We want to reintroduce it back. So we're going to say entry dot show. Okay. So basically we exit the sub, because when we exit the sub, all the value gets deleted from the memory, and then all value gets deleted from memory, and entry dot show, basically reintroduce the form. Okay. Right. Let's do the spin button. Okay, let's do the spin button. Okay, so I have the spin button. Okay, the first thing is I want to assign the value. Okay, me dot premium. Okay, me dot premium dot value. Okay, basically I'm going to assign this premium value. I'm going to assign this value to the value that I have set on the spin button. Okay, that's what I'm going to do, right? So me.premium.value is just going to be the me.spin button dot value. And where was this value assigned? The spin button 1 value was assigned during the initialization event. The event was just 10. So this value will now be returned to the me.premium.value. That's why when we ran the form, initially, we did not see the value 10, right? The reason being that, right? So if I were to uncomment it, right, I would actually not be able to, right? I might result in an error because, right? Well, let's try to run the form without the comments. All right, let's see if we run into an error. Okay, let's see if we run into an error. Okay, it's not resulting in an error. Okay, so basically, what's happening now is the value has been retained. Okay, now we need a way to manifest this value into the form. So it's going to be transferred to the premium dot value. Okay, so that's what happens when the spin button value is changed. Okay, so when the spin button value is changed, we run the form and we're going to see 10, 11, right? So now we need to change the increment. Okay, so the way we're going to set the increment is we are going to go to the spin button 1, and then we're going to say spin up. What happens when we spin up, right? We want to have a 10% increment, right? So the way we're going to do it is that me dot spin button 1 dot value. This value will be equals to me dot spin button 1 dot value. Okay, you saw initially the value was increasing by 1, right? So we don't want it to increase by 1, so we want to increase by 10. So by default, it's increasing by 1. So we have to increase another 9. Okay, we have to add another 9. Okay, not 10. Because I showed you earlier, it was increasing by 1. Now we want to increase it by 10. So similarly, if I go to the spin button 1 and I spin down, I'm going to decrease by 10, not decrease by 1. Okay. So let's try to run this code. Okay, I'm getting 20, I'm getting 30. But now, if I click this, you see, it's giving me a debug error. Do you know why it's giving me a debug error? Because I've set the max value as 30 and the mean value as 10. Right? So that's why if I try to exit 30, right, it's on the spin button here, it's giving me an error. So to overcome this error, I'm going to say on error, resume next. Okay, the same thing here. On error, resume next. Okay, so I hope you understand what this spin button is doing. Okay, so initially we are registering this value. Okay, so if I just remove this on the change. Okay, if I just remove this on the change, okay, I run this, I'm not seeing the value. Okay, I'm not seeing the value, but the value has been registered into the spin button. The spin button, basically the up and down, that's a spin button. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to uncomment it, and now the value will be transferred to the spin button. The spin button value can manifest itself. It can manifest itself during the initialization event because it has a container to be displayed, right? Previously it had no container to be displayed. Now it had a container to be displayed. Then we want to work with the increment. So by default, the increment was by 1. So we want to make it 10 increment. So that's why we added 9. By default, the increment was by 1. We wanted the increment to go by 10. We minus 9. And why we introduced an error handling was because we have set the mean and max value as 10 and 30. So in the event that it goes below 10, it wouldn't go below 10. So that's why it results in an error, right? Because we've set the cap and we're trying to bring it down below 10. So that's why VBA is giving us this debug error. So that's why we say on error, resume next. So we just allow it to resume, but nothing is going to happen because we have already set the cap. We have already set the cap, right? So if I run this, now 10, 20, 30, 30, 20, 10. Okay. So we have sorted out. Now there's another problem that I have to be worried about. You see, I have to worry about users typing into this premium thing, right? I don't want them to be able to type into it. Okay. I want this premium text box to be controlled entirely by the spin button. Okay. So the way to do it, there are two ways to do it. I'm going to show you both ways. The first way is I can go to my premium button. I can just go to enable. enabled here, and I can just go to false. If I enter false, now I run the form, you could see that false is not, it's grayed out. So this text box is entirely controlled by the spin button. But this is a little bit ugly because it's being, grayed out. So I don't like to use this approach. Okay, I'm going to show you the approach that I tend to use. Okay, what I tend to do is I'm going to first enable this back. Okay, this has been enabled, so we're going to view the code. So I'm going to close the form and I'm going to run it. Okay, it's been enabled, right? But so now we can make changes. I don't want them to be able to type into this form. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the premium, okay, the premium text box, and then I'm going to invoke the key press. Okay, I'm going to invoke the key press event. Okay, and what I'm going to write in the keyword on this event is a very simple one-line code. A key ASCII, yeah, I believe, equals to 0. Okay, so now when I close the form and I run it, you would see that I'm not able to type into the form. Now it's entirely controlled by the spin button. Okay, all right. So we have solved the spin button, right? So that was a pretty big chunk. Now we are going to solve for the name, date, the country, gender. Okay, so this one is a selection, this one's a selection, and then this one is just transferring whatever value that's been transferred. So all of them will be transferred from the add. Okay, so we have solved one of the bigger problem of this user form, which was the premium percentage increment. Okay, so now I can finally go to my add the add button, right? So I'm going to go to the add button. So I'm going to dim L row first. Okay, prior to performing the validation, it's better for us to know where we're going to populate this field into the worksheet. So I'm just going to say dim L row as long. And I'm going to say dim L row equals to sheet 2 because that's the sheet of the user form. And then range A and rows dot count dot n xl up dot row. Okay, and then because this is the last row, I want to add another one. Okay, so the next available row is what I'm basically saying. L row plus 1. Okay, that is the first thing we're going to do. Okay, I'll get to you in a second. All right, guys, sorry. So basically, I'm transferring the value into the L row, which is this. Okay, so for the first entry, it's going to go into 2. The L row was just A1. So we're going to populate it into L row plus 1. Right? So that's what basically means. Right? So now I'm going to perform my validation. The first validation is a name validation. Okay. So I'm going to say if is numeric me dot my name. Right? That was the name of the name field of the user form. Right? Then I'm going to say message box. I'm going to get an alert that says you need to input only text in the name field. Then I'm going to exit the sub because I don't want to be this. I don't want to be in the sub of this add click anymore, right? I'm going to exit the sub, right? So if I click add and okay, it's not inputted a name. I mean, it's not inputted basically a text in the my name. Then it's just going to exit. That's what it's doing, all right? Then we're going to do validation for the premium. Basically, that one has the premium percentage. No, the amount paid, right? Validation for the amount paid, right? If not, we don't have to do a validation for the premium percentage because that value is being controlled by the spin button, right? Me dot paid. Then message box. You need to input a number in the paid field. Okay, and then I'm going to exit out and end the if. So we have accounted for the validation for the 2 level. Okay, so if I run the file, I have to make sure this one is a text. If it's not a text, then it's going to return the alert. Amount paid here, this one has to be number, right? That's why I say this one. What we're seeing in the code here is this one has to be, if not number for the me.paid, right? Then get this message box number. Okay, so we've done the validation. Now we're going to transfer the fields in the user form to the work sheet. Transfer the name field. So the name was on sheet 2, I suppose, I believe, right? The code name. So it just so happened the code name and tab name is the same, but I'm using the code name here. I've explained to you why on that, right? And L row. Remember the L row is actually the L row plus 1, the next available row after the last row. And what I like to do is I like to just trim. Okay, I like to trim it to remove any maybe leading or trailing space when the user inputted the name. Okay, so trim. My name is the name for the name field. And remember, the value on the left is being assigned to by the value on the right. Okay. Remember, value in left is assigned to by the value on the right. Okay. So I've transferred the name. Now transfer amount paid. That one is going to be on sheet 2.range B and L row dot, and remember that was amount paid has to be in currency. So I'm going to use the word format me dot paid, right? And if we enter $50, it should return us. I mean, if the user inputted 50, it should return 100 because it's a 1 month bonus. And the format is just currency. So you have to change the regional settings depending on what your original setting is. The default currency would appear. Okay. Next thing, we're going to transfer which field? We are going to transfer the premium percentage field. Okay. And the way is sheet 2.range C and L row equals to format me dot premium. Is this right? Okay, first 0, 0%. Okay, so when you're formatting it into percentage, if I have the value 10, Excel is going to treat it as not 10%, right? It's going to treat it as 1,000, right? It's going to treat it as 1,000, right? So 1 is the equivalent of 100%. 10% is going to be 100 times 10, which is 1,000, right? So that's why we're going to have to times. We're going to divide by 100. Okay, we're going to divide by 100. Okay, so this is something that you should be aware of. Next thing, we're going to transfer the country. The country was in the list box, I'm very sure, right? That was in range D and L row. Okay, I've done this quite a number of times with my students, so I hope I'm not missing anything here. It was me dot list box 1, right? That was a list box name, right? We did not change that. Then we're going to transfer the gender. That was in the option button. Remember that? So I'm going to say me dot option button 1. We did not change the code name either. So the first one was male equals to true, which means if this one is checked, then sheet 2 dot range E and L row equals to male. Else, if me dot option button 2 dot value equals to false, then sheet 2 dot range E and L row equals to female. And because we have an if, we always have to end the if. Okay, so I think we are pretty much done. Okay, so we have transferred everything to the sheet, and now we can test the form. So I'm going to run the form. I'm going to first try to put a number, and then I'm going to add it. It's going to give a C. You need to input only text in the name field. Okay, so I have to change that. Now I'm going to put some number in the amount paid and try to run it. You need to input a number in the paid field, and then it exits the start. Okay, so let's cancel this. Okay, it cancels. Let's have some value, and then we reset it. It's been reset. Okay, that's why you see the glitch, right? It exits the form, and then it reintroduces the form. That's what the code is doing, right? The full name now is, I'm just going to say John. Amount paid was $20. So it should return 40 here, 40 US dollars, okay? Because I've set the regional settings as the US dollar and the window settings, right? Premium, okay? It's not giving me an error, right? 10, 20, 30. So I'm going to say 20. I hope to return 20%. Germany and female. And I'm going to add it, okay? So we're not seeing the gender. Why are we not seeing the gender? That is something we're going to go to the code and see, right? So sheet 2, range E and L row. Me dot option button 1. I'll get you in a second. Alright guys, the reason was because this was set at false. So if option button 2 is equals to true, then this thing should be female. So we're going to try to run this code again. Full name Johnny, amount paid 50, so it should return as 100. Premium 20, so it should return percentage 20%. Gender female. We're going to add the code, right? 50, that's multiplied by 2. Percentage, it's giving us in 2 decimal form, right? 2 decimal place. Country Germany, female. Now if we change Austria, we run again. Now it's giving us this thing. If I change the gender, I'm getting male, and I think that's about it. All right. So before I end the video, I also want to say that there's another thing we can do, right? If you are one of those person who like to control your form using the tab order, right? If you want to move from one field to another field using tab order, you can actually change the tab order by going to view tab order, and then you can just move up and down, right? You can just move up and down accordingly, right? So if you want to move this up, move this down, right? Okay. So that's about it for this session, all right? In the next session, we'll go into combo boxes. Basically, we'll learn about everything that you need to know about combo boxes, and then the third one, we'll go into this box mapping. That's about it, guys. Thank you and take care.